Thank you. Good morning, members. Welcome to today's meeting of the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee. This meeting has been live streamed and recorded and will be made available for viewing through our Council's website. Before we begin, can I remind you of a few of the arrangements in the guidance note? Microphones should be muted and videos switched off when you are not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, please write speak in the Teams chat function and you will be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. If the chat function is not readily available, I will do my best to keep an eye on the raise hands on the screen as well. The usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to either leave the Teams meeting for that period of time or alternatively write leave in the Teams chat function and then join when you're able to rejoin us. This is required in order to allow us to record member presence and also ensure that we remain quorate. And please do not use the chat function for any contributions that are material to debates. So with that, we'll turn to item 1, Sediment apologies and Chair's approval of members' remote participation. Nick, can you provide the sediment and any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We haven't received any apologies this morning, and with the exception of Councillors Hislop and Wilson, all other members are present on Teams.
Hislop's apology, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, thank you, Nick. I naturally approve of members' remote participation. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest that you wish to make, please? I will take it that we do not, and I see Councillor Wilson has just joined us. Item 3 is a note of the minute of the previous meeting of 8th December 2020. Can we note the minute of that meeting, please? Councillor Thompson, you have a point?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just on the very last paragraph of the minute. It talks about the procedural matter, saying arrangements will be made for the next meeting of this to take place earlier than the scheduled date of 25th of May. So I was just, obviously we're noting the minute, but I just wondered, what does that statement actually mean now today? Just if anyone can answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. So my understanding is that that was our original intention. However, a couple of factors made it rather difficult to have the meeting earlier than the 25th, unfortunately. The most recent being the heavy involvement of both Nick and Vlad in the elections. But if either gentleman wishes to clarify or expand on that further, I'd be delighted.
Yes, sorry, through you, Chair. I can confirm that part of the scheduling issues were relating to the involvement of both Nick and myself through elections and in essence a timing issue and the relevant priorities for the council at that point in time. So we went along with the 25th of May date instead.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, are we content to note the minute, please? Okay. Okay, thank you, members. Item 4 is the process for review and update of the schemes of administration and delegation, determining a key decision definition, area committee responsibilities, and the future role of the Review of Standing Orders Subcommittee, and the report is by Head of Governance and Assurance. It may incidentally be one of the longest report titles I've had in a while. This report invites us to agree a process to review the schemes of delegation to committees and also to officers, with a view to having recommendations for the new council to consider in May 2022, and also reflects previous decisions of this committee with regard to reviewing the roles and responsibilities of area committees, as well as the role of this committee itself. We are also invited as part of this work to consider the recommendation of the Finance, Procurement and Transformation Committee in relation to defining a key decision for the council. Nick is here to assist if members have any questions. Nick, before I go to members' questions and comments, is there anything that you wish to add at this point, please?
Not at this point, Chair, but certainly if members have questions or need any clarification or background, particularly around key decision element, I'm happy to assist.
Thank you, Nick. So I think we will take questions and comments first, and then deal with the process points, I think, and then the key decision point. Work through them in that order. But first, I have Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Carruthers. So, Adam, first, please.
Sorry, I can't think what one of those three my question comes under, but my particular question is around no problem with the process or the need to do the review, but in particular it's by May 2022 in the recommendation. I'm just wondering what's the rationale for it going on that long. I think there's something about obviously the FPT review and the other findings from other places have been found by this council. I think that there's a need to get closure in this council term on those particular issues. So I would appreciate a bit of a rationale for the sort of longevity of the timescale.
Thanks, Adam. So clearly, I think some of our deliberations may be, depending on what they turn out to be, matters for the new council to put in place. If, for example, they involved a substantial reorganisation of delegations or committee oversight, it might be tricky to do that with, for argument's sake, 3 months left to run, before the May elections. So that certainly was underpinning some of my thinking about it. But we need to take a collective view on the timescale we consider to be appropriate. I think also, in fairness, that probably the workshop approach outlined in the report, while I would hope can happen briskly, will take some time. So I think that again will be a factor to a degree. Equally, I take your point in terms of being able to work through fairly briskly the items which are maybe legacy points or associated with the work that we have already done on the other reviews undertaken by other committees. It's possible, therefore, we might want to separate these two out potentially. But we'll go to Vlad first and then come back to you, Adam. Vlad?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo what you've just stated, Chair, in terms of the general thinking, but also probably the more important part from my end is in terms of what we want to do is get this right, both in terms of the key decisions element of it and the interplay that it has with the schema delegations, and what we want to have is that full scoping exercise so that we get that right. And what I want to have is resilience here in terms of both the schema delegations, key decisions and area committees, which is a long-term infrastructure. Look at that assessment and then designing what is best, and it's very clear to us that there's a very, very strong interplay between the key decisions definition and ultimately what we do with that, and how that interplays with the schema delegation, both in terms of committees and officers. So what we want to do is, in essence, thrash that out, further assess it in terms of workshops with members and so on, and put forward options that we can consider and ultimately take a view which is a more resilient view and a more long-term view, rather than simply coming up with a definition that might not sit nicely within our schema delegations, and then there are practicality issues surrounding it. So what I want to do is get this right, in effect, and hence what we're proposing is that we have these workshops and we conclude hopefully the workshops by the end of this year. with a view to then that assessment and designing and reporting taking place as of the start of 2022, which would lead into the new council for decision making. And it may well be that ultimately our proposals will be taken up by the new council. So hopefully that gives an overview of our strategy here and why we have in effect put both the key decisions and the scheme of delegations, both to officers and committee, together.
Thank you, Vlad. Adam, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I suppose, my key thinking is that actually, so we're saying it's going to take a year to do a lot of this work, which in itself isn't good or bad or right or wrong. But I think, my experience of coming to the council in 2017, you're the first statutory meeting, you're being asked to do an awful lot. I think that this council, on a cross-party basis, has agreed that there was a problem. We've done a lot of work on that problem, and this is, particularly, not necessarily, particularly looking at area committees or this committee, but the 2.2, the recommendations, is a bit of a legacy trying to tie that up. And I do think there's a responsibility in this council to tie this up if it's for future council to make that decision. They don't necessarily have the background knowledge that we have acquired. They haven't gone through the reviews, the FPT review that we've done. And I think that there is a bit of responsibility in this council to essentially get that fixed. Of course, be open to any future council to change it, to undo it, to do something completely different. But I just think, at this moment in time, this council has, the current composition of the council has said there has been a problem. We need to fix that. And I think that, we really should be fixing that before the council elections.
So for clarity, I think that's then specifically in relation to the key decision recommendation from FPT.
Yes.
Okay. So Vlad, can I come back to you just on that point? I'm conscious that Councillor Crowes is waiting patiently, but there is a point there, I think, about the two things being different. And I wonder whether there would be any possibility separating them out on the basis of what you had discussed is perhaps not straightforward. But what do you think? Is there any mileage in that?
Again, I will highlight the interplay between the scheme of delegations and the key decisions definition and what we actually want to achieve with that. So what I want to do is absolutely get this right. However, what I would suggest is the timescales that we've given us is all of this has to be concluded before May of next year. So it can still be for the council to ultimately decide, this council for it to decide and implement that with a view to, as I said, if we carry out the workshops, we can start reporting on this at the start of next year, and potentially we might actually get this done before May of next year. That would be the ideal scenario, and that would in effect tie up what has been pointed out, that a decision has been taken. We're obviously implementing that decision, and what we want to do is do so before the end of this particular council in May 2022. So that's still, the flexibility is still there to do that, and that's what we would aim to do. Ultimately, it will be for full council to decide whether they wish to take that decision at that point in time, or whether they wish to leave that for the new council.
And that decision, I suppose, will have to be informed by what we actually come up with. Okay, no, I think that's helpful, Vlad. Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Curlis next. Ian, please.
Thanks, Ian. Just my point wasn't, I think it's a relevant point Adam's raised there, but I think it's been really, really well discussed. I've got some sympathy towards what Adam's saying there, but I do think through that the way Vlad's outlined it, so we'll get to December this year, we will have concluded our workshops. Hopefully we'll have spoken to area committees as well in regards to that particular point, see what they are in, because we've got 4 individuals. every individual member of the council describes how they've got a different view how area committees work. But I think it'd be good practice to get and understand what each area committee felt as well. But I think, okay, whether it's February or March, full council next year, I think that's where it'll be heading to in real terms. Whether the council makes a decision to adopt it at that point or refer it to the next council, that would be the moot point for me, and that would be a decision to be made at that point by full council. But I think it's a really good question to have asked and a relevant point, because it was in the back of my mind. But obviously these type of things, as you look through them, especially with scrutiny reviews, is similar to process to what we're looking at here to a degree, and that kind of proof of the pudding always comes out through the debate. Very interesting, and it will be interesting, this one in particular. It's so many correlations, so many different policies and delegations and such like we have across our council. My point probably was more so, Chair, that I'd like to kind of understand. So we're being asked quite very vaguely. I think it's a really good report to start off with. I think it's well crafted. Thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It's short and concise, straight to the point. Because of the amount we've debated it already, made a lot of sense. But it's when it comes down to, okay, how many workshops, when will there be, who will be involved, whether is it area committees. I would like to get some, so that our officers, Vlad or Nick, will have some kind of idea what they're thinking, how it should be designed, the structure, as we go forward over the year. So just to hear that point, please, Rob, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I think that would be really helpful for everybody. Vlad, can you assist with that, please?
Yes, of course, Chair. It's a very valid point, and it's one which I've raised in the preparation for this, in terms of we are looking at a timetable of workshops to be carried out. In terms of the area committees, it's important that we go out to the area committees and seek their views through that process. So that's part and parcel of it. But absolutely, what we're looking at just now is the scheduling of various workshops, and in essence you've got three subjects here. So you've got the scheme of delegations, which is both to officers and committees. You've got the area committee specific question, and you've got your key decisions question, all interplay with each other, because when you take a decision either through a committee or through officers, you want to know whether that's a key decision and ultimately affects one or the other. So I guess in terms of the logistics of the workshops, we are still working through that, because we're trying to figure out whether it's best to have one long workshop that in effect deals with the various elements of this, and maybe roll that out and have opportunity for all members to engage through that, or whether we have the subject matters separated, knowing that it does interplay with others, but in effect have three different workshop subjects for discussion and focus. But that's the logistics that we're trying to work through, and alongside that, as you'll know, we have to work within the scheduling that's available to us. So we are literally working through that, and we will design hopefully what will be the best, having looked at all of those factors, what is the best proposal in terms of the various workshops. As I said, in terms of the area committees, I think we agreed previously, as I understand, to go to the area committees and seek their views, and we'll have to carry that out. So that's a specific piece of work. But in terms of the various workshops, as I said, is whether we put them all in one, or we break them up into the various subjects and then put it all together at the end.
Thanks, Vlad. I think that if it was one workshop, it might be an immensely long workshop. So I think that could be a bit of an issue. Before I bring Ian back in, I just wanted to check it with regard to paragraph 3.2. In terms of the review of schemes, this was reflecting the possibility of a number of workshops whereby directors and senior management or senior managers could consider with members delegations for their respective areas of responsibilities and committees. So, I mean, if that is in scope, then that could be a workshop by directorate, and then potentially another 2 subject workshops on top of that, i.e. key decisions and area committees. So that does end up being, more than one a month between the end of the recess and Christmas, which is actually quite a bit. Okay. I see Vlad nodding. Ian, do you want to come back in, and then I'll go to Nick? Ian?
Please, thank you, Chair. Just a brief point. I'm just wondering, so this is, because we haven't got anything actually right in front of us, say here's a scheduler or a programme of workshops, stroke committees, how we involve and such like. Would it be possible to, I'm not trying to shorten this meeting by any means, I'll spend as long as we need on this particular subject, but I think it's the right debate to be having. So, but would it be appropriate to delegate the principles of what we're going to agree here potentially to the first workshop, and the first workshop being a single agenda item before recess, just to discuss, okay, so we'll get presented with the facts, figures, this is what could possibly work between the end of recess, as you just outlined in say, the last meeting in December, and then at that point, we're really delegating it to through a consensus, through an agreement. Again, so ultimately, workshops are not decision-making bodies before anybody comes back and says that, but I think it's potentially a way forward, only because it's a great report, like I was saying, but there's a number, we could spend the next 3 hours discussing this and coming to the same conclusion. I think it's, and by that time, we should be sitting in the same room with it, luck, which will make a big difference to me, Chair.
No, I take the point about for us to have a plan in front of us. I think the sooner we can get to that point, the better, in my view. And my own preference would be if the diary will permit it, and the other workload on officers for us, indeed, to make a start before the recess if we can. I think that would be preferable from my point of view, and I suspect members will probably agree with that across the board. Nick, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, it was just to reflect, as you set out at paragraph 3.2, that those were some of the initial thoughts around how the process might work in terms of taking a directorate approach / committee approach, and then potentially having a separate session focusing on the other two matters, so area committees and key decisions. But as Vlad's pointed out, the key thing is to avoid unintended consequences down the line when there's a potential for conflict, I guess, between any key decision definition and your delegations to officers and committees. So that's the key thing we'd seek to avoid. We've had a quick look at the diary, and I've got a range of dates throughout September, October, November, and concluding before Christmas in terms of potential dates for the workshop. So certainly that's the objective, to get it all done and dusted before the end of the year in terms of the workshop element of it. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I suppose the other point was in terms of how soon members of the subcommittee would be able to see what that programme looks like. And of course, it will have to be made available to all members in due course. Vlad, I see your hand up. Do you want to come in at this point?
Yeah, it's just in terms of the ask of delegating the approval of that scheduling. I would probably propose, rather than leave it to a workshop, is that it's either delegated to the officers or delegated to yourself, Chair, or to the officer in consultation with the Chair, in terms of just putting that particular scheduling in front of you and just agreeing how we take that forward.
Certainly, I think that would be more usual, for sure. I have another two members wanting to come in. So, Adam, you're first, and then Stephen. Adam?
Yeah, I mean, Nick's just outlined sort of some of the dates that have been arranged or in the pipeline, sort of concluding by Christmas, which sort of keeps me happy from my earlier point, and I'm quite happy that we sort of just amend that recommendation so that the dates are agreed with yourself.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Stephen?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I do think there is a point to be made about completing the cycle of a piece of work. Obviously, and I think Councillor Wilson was kind of touching on that within a council term. I'm also conscious, and it just occurs to me because it's not mentioned here, and I've been looking at the forward plan, etc., and it's something that's come up regularly, which is the review of outside bodies. Now, I would have also, in the same spirit, have hoped that would have been concluded within this council term. It really does seem to be wading through treacle, but the thing is that both area committees and full council, I mean, we heard about the first meeting of the new council, as it were, basically allocate people to outside bodies. So, I mean, I think, I think it would be remiss if we didn't include that in the scope of this, or at least that could be included in the workshops, because we really need to pull our finger out. I mean, that's been basically since 2017 and probably before. But so maybe we can sort of articulate that some in the recommendations. But certainly, if we can get this part done before Christmas, that would be timely, I think.
Stephen, I think it's a very fair point. The review of outside bodies has been a piece of work which has been outstanding, or I think actually to be fair to officers, my understanding is that it has been partially undertaken. I believe that work has been done on it, although I haven't had any particular sight of it. Perhaps that can be clarified. I certainly know there are an awful lot of them to work through, and no doubt a great deal has happened since 2017, as we will all reflect. But your point about the first statutory meeting is a good one, because it will either be then or at the subsequent full council that a lot of these appointments will be made. I see both Vlad and Nick have their hands up. Vlad, I'll go to you first and then to Nick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the particulars of the timing of that, I'll maybe leave that with Nick and update exactly as to where we are. But we have started that piece of work, and absolutely one of my aims and objectives is to get that done hopefully well before the next council takes up its term, in terms of ensuring that when we are appointing to those outside bodies, we know exactly why we're appointing them, we know the terms of reference for that, and any particular factors that we need to consider for those particular bodies, whether there's particular representation that's required, and what level of participation is required as well. So there's a whole scoping exercise that we absolutely need to have ready for the next council. I'll let Nick come in terms of where we're at and the logistics around that.
Thanks, Vlad. That's encouraging. Nick?
Yes, just to say, Chair, yes, this has been a piece of work that has been commenced on more than one occasion. In fact, we have had some capacity issues in recent months, but certainly it's something that the team can now turn their attention to as part of this review to get it concluded before the end of the council.
That I think is very helpful, Nick. Thank you. And certainly I think that timescale makes absolute sense, because clearly the mixed decisions, or any large number of decisions on outside bodies, will be made by the next council. So I think that's absolutely appropriate. Okay, thank you for that. Ian, you want to come back in?
Thanks. Just to agree with the delegation to yourself, but I think Councillor Thompson's point's interesting as well. My understanding what we would receive from that in particular. So we have a statutory appointments that we have to make. Integration Joint Board, maybe as an example, we have to appoint to that outside body as a council. But I suppose you could almost fit COSLA into that because we're members. But so you've got that type, but then you've got the smaller ones, like whether it's day centres, local trusts. I just felt that very much that level of scrutiny would be given with the next council in particular. Yes, we want terms of reference and our criteria to be exact, firm and precise, and that's what we really need shaped up for the next council coming in. That just to give my thoughts on that, Chair. Thanks.
No, Ian, I agree with that. I think it's absolutely the case that we have ended up with a very large number of outside bodies, which to which the appointments are made from all over the council. and many of them will be for very historic reasons. Some of them require still to be made, even though our circumstances as an authority have changed, or indeed the circumstances of the body involved might have changed. Perhaps with regard to some trusts, they used to be able to disperse far more grant than they are now able to do. But it's not in our gift to change the terms of the bequest or the piece of legislation that set them up. I think there are others where potentially there is much more of a degree of flexibility available to us. But absolutely, I think that the clarity is the fundamentally important point. Sorry, Ian, do you want to come back?
No, perfect. Thanks, Chair. I'm fine.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, members. I think we're reaching a consensus in terms of the process we want to undertake and the timescales that we wish to apply to it, which is really helpful. But before we start making decisions, I wanted to have a look, if members are content with doing this, at the definition of a key decision, because I am slightly concerned about what the implications of this might be. Now, certainly, it seems that we are relying on a definition of a key decision, which is not necessarily particularly relevant to the way in which we do business and the way in which we're structured, as it appears to follow the English local authority executive model, which is substantially different to the way in which we make decisions in a committee system here. So my question, I suppose, was, are we content that that's the sort of definition that we ought to be looking at? And if it isn't, what else should we potentially be looking at instead? I think it's probably worthwhile us having a think about that, because clearly that's going to be part of the work that we'll be undertaking through the workshop process. Adam, you want to come in?
I mean, looking at Appendix 1, the wording, obviously, just by the simple nature of the way in which local government is formed in different ways in England and Scotland, means that the wording absolutely is not going to be appropriate or in line with our delegations. But I do think that there is something along the lines of, different committees will treat different decisions similar decisions differently. So when I think of some of the grants that we award, our delegations at present, sometimes, particularly delegations to officers, sometimes are, first of all, they don't really specify, and some you might get a figure of £10,000. Any grant below £10,000 is delegated to officers. In some cases, it's higher. So for me, the sort of the spirit of a key decision, what is the level of funding delegation we're happy to give to officers? I don't think the geographical is as important. I think that actually a lot of decisions that any committee makes, the vast majority of them will affect much of the region. But I think for me that is in getting to the spirit of a key decision is about actually some sort of similarity across the council and across council committees of the sort of level of financial decision making, because in some cases across the scheme of delegation to officers it is non-existent, and in others actually we have different levels across different areas of the council. I think that actually that focus on a key decision will help us to get to a bit more of a common situation across the council.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I certainly think that's useful so far as my own thinking is concerned. So I'm grateful for that. Stephen, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think ultimately, whatever a key decision means to an English local authority, there's maybe something of value in that type of decision that we can then fit into, the way in which the framework in which we operate in Scotland. So that's, no monopoly on good ideas and all that sort of thing. But I think there is definitely something about, I suppose that I'm just imagining area committees. How many key decisions could you make a year before you've got a budget issue corporately? You know, so I mean, there is obviously that would be teased out, and what the scope and level and the range of key decisions, or whatever they're going to be called, would be. So clearly it does open up that delegation at area committees at the moment, where any decision requiring a recommendation requiring has financial implications gets referred back to parent committee, as it were. So and it could make area committees much more relevant and have a greater impact, or we might not have area committees. You know, I don't know. I don't want to sort of presuppose what might happen, but I think the terminology might have to be reviewed. But I think in essence there might be something there. It's like, yes, that is, as Councillor Wilson sort of saying, there's something in that we could use in some way to help deal with this. Thank you.
So before I bring Nick in, I mean, potentially it is something about the forward business plan that I think do, you know, reasonably commonly say, wait a minute, we're now aware of something coming forward which isn't in the plan yet. In fact, I think there was some discussion about that just the other day. But potentially there's something in that about highlighting the fact that, you know, the item that's coming forward is a key decision. Once we've reached a clear view of what that definition is, because that would certainly align with the principle that, you know, every member can ask to see that paper if they don't get it sent to them, or see it for themselves, and indeed any member can address a meeting with the permission of the chair. So potentially there is something there about a definition being interpolated into our systems. To allow members to be clear about, you know, where a key decision is coming forward. But I also take the point that equally has to be reflected in terms of officers' delegated authority, that authority which they exercise on our behalf. And I think there is a fair point there about consistency, although I can see some issues with it. In fairness, I think that a key decision in social work might be very different to a key decision in communities, for argument's sake. But this is possibly leaching into what we want to do in the workshop. So I'll bring Nick in and then see if there are any other comments at this point. Nick?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to highlight, I think, that when thinking about key decisions, and you've touched on it there, you also need to think about the forward plan, because the advent of definitions of key decisions was around the changing governance models in England in 2000, where most councils went with a cabinet, and it was about transparency of decision making, so that the public weren't left feeling that big decisions were taken in a council by just 10 members that the public had no prior knowledge of. So the forward plan was introduced in respect of all the key decisions had to be published 4 months in advance of them coming forward. So it's, I think, as you've alluded to there, I think it's important to think about the influence of the forward plan as well, and what we might be able to do with the forward plan in terms of ensuring transparency of decision making, if you like. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, I think that absolutely is part of the consideration. But I also see Councillor Wilson's point, Adam's point, about there being a consistency applied to key decisions which are delegated to officers, and I think we don't wish to lose sight of that either. Neither of these is necessarily completely straightforward. It will, I think, all hinge on the definition. Okay. I invite any further comments or questions from members before we go to the recommendations, please.
Sorry, Rob, I put speak in the chat function again.
Adam, my apologies. It had just slipped off the bottom of the screen for some reason. No. Carry on. And then I see Stephen after you. Carry on.
I mean, to be honest, in the back of what Nick said there, of more council business was put on the forward plan in a timely manner and much further in advance than what happens at the moment, then that would be progress, in my opinion. But I think that, you know, we're sort of starting to stretch into the territory of what will be discussed at the workshop. I think there's been quite a number of things mentioned today which we can explore further. I completely take the point that in some areas of the council a key decision might mean a different thing, but then I think that that's a discussion we can have with all, you know, 42 elected members. And you know, the appendix does actually outline any exceptions or any exceptional circumstances, and it might be actually that there are a couple of areas of the council where there are exceptional circumstances, but that's a discussion we can have. But I think certainly I appreciate the background on sort of where the key decisions came from in English local authorities. But I think that there is something about the spirit of it, and as Councillor Thompson said, you know, that there's no monopoly on good ideas. You know, let's take the learning and let's take the good bits of it and try and apply it to how we work here.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah. Okay. I think we. Sorry, I beg your pardon. I said I would bring Stephen in and then neglected to do so. Stephen, you're next, please.
Yeah. Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, it's helpful just getting a bit of background from the thinking from Nick there. I think maybe I did it, you know, when I saw these papers first, I sort of did a bit of cursory research, I suppose, in terms of this, and I think we're kind of unfamiliar with the cabinet model generally here because we have a scheme of delegation to committees, you know, so we have, it's not. I think it just seemed like something chalk and cheese initially when I first sort of looked at it. I thought, well, that's not necessarily the same habitat, if you like, for certain things to grow. But obviously, be that as it may, there's certainly some application that such a concept could have within a structure like our own, because we're sort of determinedly not a cabinet in certain ways. But however, that may change. You know, a new council might think differently. So I welcome the background and just that's happy to go forward on that basis.
Thanks, Stephen. I mean, personal opinion, I hope a new council wouldn't think differently, but of course, that's entirely up to a new council. None of us might be in it. Who knows? You know, that's something that will necessarily follow in the future. I think that your points about taking the good aspects and making them fit what this council does and how it is structured are very, very much in point. Members, if there aren't any further points or questions, turn to the recommendations, which I think have changed somewhat from those which are set out in front of us. At 2.1, I mean, we are agreed that there should be a process. I think we're clear that should happen on the basis of a series of workshops, and that those workshops are concluded by the end of the year, and that you're delegating to myself with officers to establish that programme of workshops, and that they're then communicated to all members as soon as is reasonably possible. Does that sound fair?
Just in regards to my, sorry, Chair.
Yes, sorry, carry on. Yeah.
Just in regards to how does that fit in with my thoughts and view earlier in regards to possibly having one before the recess just to discuss the kind of layout of the workshops, obviously delegating that to yourself. Is that still an option? But happy just to delegate that to yourself if you feel that's the best way forward. But ultimately, that workshop would inform you and allow you to make that decision fully.
So very much in members' hands. No, certainly logistics will be logistics and space in the council diary would be an issue there, I think. Vlad, I see you appearing. Did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, if it's okay, Chair. My gut instinct on that is it would be preferable if it was delegated to yourself, Chair, and then we can agree that. There are quite a number of meetings obviously happening between now and the recess, and quite a lot going on, and other priorities. So my gut instinct is it would be preferable from my end of things in terms of officers and scheduling if we were to delegate that to yourself, and thereafter we would have the workshops as agreed between September and December.
Comfortable with that, Chair? I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you, Ian. And I should say as well, with regard to 2.1, I think we are agreed that the programme must have particular regard to the future role and responsibilities of area committees, and also to this subcommittee. I'm conscious we haven't really discussed that in any great detail today, but we certainly did at the 8th December meeting. So, members, are we content with that as 2.1? Okay. And at 2.2, we're asked to consider, as part of the reviews, the recommendation of FBT committee in relation to determining a definition for a key decision for the council. And I think, if I've understood our discussion correctly, that we are agreed that we wish to consider that as part of the sequence of workshops that we have just agreed at 2.1. Is that fair? And are we content to agree with that? I'll take it that we are. Excellent, members. Thank you very much. I have not been notified of any urgent business and will therefore close the meeting with my thanks for your contributions and attendance today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.